The silence on the other end of the phone was the first sign. It wasn't a bad connection. It was a weighted, deliberate pause, the kind that precedes a piece of news you are not meant to hear. It was my brother, Terrence, calling a few days before Christmas, his voice full of the usual gruff cheer that had been a constant in my life for 72 years. He was asking a simple question, a logistical detail that somehow managed to unravel the entire tapestry of my world, pulling a single, vital thread until everything I thought I knew began to come undone. "Molly, just firming up plans," he'd said. "How are you getting to Charlie's on Saturday? Should I swing by and pick you up around noon?" I held the receiver, its cool plastic suddenly feeling slick and foreign against my ear. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, a sound that had marked the peaceful rhythm of my days for decades, suddenly seemed thunderous, each tick a hammer blow against my composure. Charlie's house? On Saturday? Christmas was on Saturday. I blinked, staring at the poinsettia on my windowsill, its vibrant red as stark, almost mocking contrast to the gray numbness that was beginning to seep into my bones. "Charlie's?" I repeated, my voice a thready whisper I barely recognized as my own. "What's at Charlie's, Terry?" Another silence, this one longer, heavier. I could almost hear the gears turning in his mind, the clumsy backtrack he was about to attempt. "The Christmas dinner, Molly. You know, the big family get-together." His words were slow, cautious, as if he were speaking to a child or someone recovering from a great shock. And perhaps I was. A shock was certainly descending upon me, a cold, creeping fog that started in my stomach and spread outwards, chilling me from the inside. I had no idea what he was talking about. My Christmas plans, as far as I was concerned, involved a quiet day at home. Charlie and his wife, Tina, had told me they were having a very small, intimate holiday this year, just the two of them, because Tina's parents were traveling abroad and they wanted to keep things simple. A quiet Christmas. I had accepted it without question, as I had learned to accept so many things since Charlie had married into a world so different from the one in which I had raised him. "Terry," I said, my voice gaining a fragile firmness, "Charlie told me they weren't doing anything for Christmas this year." The lie felt clumsy and obvious as it left my lips. I was covering for my son, a reflex honed over 40 years of motherhood. Defend, protect, smooth over. But the words tasted like ash in my mouth. Terrence let out a long, weary sigh. He was a good man, my brother. He had no patience for pretense. "Molly, that's not right. The invitation came last month. It's a huge affair. Tina's whole family is going to be there. Her cousins from Boston, her aunt from Palm Beach. I just assumed." "I'm so sorry, Molly." I wouldn't have called if I'd known. I mumbled something about a mix-up, a misunderstanding, and ended the call. I didn't want his pity. Pity felt like a shroud, and I wasn't dead yet. I sank into my worn armchair, the one my late husband, Frank, had always favored. The springs groaned in protest, a sound of familiar comfort that offered none today. Humiliation is a peculiar sensation. It's not a sharp pain like grief, or a hot flush like anger. It is a cold, hollowing emptiness, a feeling of being rendered invisible, insignificant. I had been erased from my own family's Christmas. And not just any Christmas, but a grand celebration, the kind Tina loved to orchestrate, full of people whose names I barely knew but whose portfolios Charlie could probably recite by heart. I was not a part of that picture. With my simple dress and my stories of his father fixing engines with grease-stained hands, did not fit into the curated elegance of their new life. For a long time, I just sat there. I thought about the sacrifices. They weren't things I ever tallied or held over his head. They were simply the texture of my life, the cost of love. After Frank died so suddenly, leaving me with a mountain of debt and a 7-year-old boy with his father's bright, curious eyes, my life had narrowed to a single purpose: Charlie. I worked 2 jobs, one cleaning offices late at night where the smell of ammonia clung to my clothes, and another as a seamstress, my fingers often raw and pricked from hours of mending other people's fine garments. I saved every penny. I bought day-old bread, patched Charlie's trousers until the patches had patches, and considered a new pair of shoes for myself an unforgivable luxury. All of it went to him. His education, his music lessons, the down payment on his first car. I poured myself out like a pitcher of water, determined to fill his life until he overflowed with opportunities one had never had. And it had worked. He had excelled, climbed, and eventually met Tina, a woman whose family owned things, not just rented them. I was proud of him. I truly was. But a part of me had watched with a quiet ache as he shed his old life like a snake sheds its skin. He smoothed the rough edges of his accent, developed a taste for wine that cost more than my weekly grocery bill, and learned to talk about stocks and mergers with an ease that made him a stranger to me. His visits became shorter, more perfunctory. He and Tina would sit stiffly on my sofa, their eyes scanning my small, tidy home as if it were a museum exhibit on ancient history. "It's so quaint, Molly," Tina would say, her smile a perfect, polished thing that never quite reached her eyes. So authentic, it was not a compliment. It was a judgment. I was a relic from a past he was actively trying to bury. Driven by a desperate, foolish need to hear his voice, to perhaps find a crack in this awful story where a simple misunderstanding could be inserted, I picked up the phone and dialed his number. It went to voicemail, and I hung up without leaving a message. What would I even say? A minute later, my phone rang. It was him. My heart leaped with a pathetic surge of hope. He was calling me back. He cared. I answered, my throat tight. Charlie? But it wasn't Charlie talking to me. I had caught him mid-call, a pocket dial or an accidental answer. His voice was loud and clear, not the gentle, slightly strained tone he used with me, but a slick, confident one he used with his friends. "No, of course not," he was saying, punctuated by a short, sharp laugh. "God forbid my mom comes. She'd embarrass me to death. Tina's parents are flying in from Geneva. Can you imagine my mom with her Tupperware of potato salad next to their vintage champagne? It would be a total disaster. She just doesn't fit, you know?" The world stopped. It did not tilt or spin. It simply ceased all motion. The air in my lungs turned to ice. My hand went slack, and the phone slipped from my grasp, clattering onto the hardwood floor. It was one thing to be excluded, to be quietly shunted aside. It was another thing entirely to hear the reasons spoken aloud, to hear the casual cruelty, the deep, abiding shame my own son felt for me. My potato salad. He had mentioned my potato salad, the dish he had begged for at every single birthday and holiday for 30 years. The one I still made for him, packing it in the same worn Tupperware container whenever he deigned to visit. The thought was so absurdly specific, so deeply personal, that a single, tearless sob escaped my chest. It was a sound of pure agony. He wasn't just ashamed of my humble background. He was ashamed of my love, of the very gestures that had defined my motherhood. In that moment, something inside me broke. It was the part of me that had made excuses for him for years. The part that had accepted the crumbs of his attention with gratitude. The part that believed my love could bridge the ever-widening canyon between his world and mine. That part of me shattered, and the pieces fell away, leaving behind something hard and cold and clear. The grief was still there, a vast, black ocean inside me. But on its surface, a sheet of ice was beginning to form. An anger so pure and so cold it felt less like an emotion and more like a physical substance, a core of steel solidifying in my spine. I did not cry. Tears felt like a surrender, and I was done surrendering. I walked numbly to my bedroom and pulled a heavy box from the top of the wardrobe. The old photo albums. I sat on the edge of my bed and opened the first one. There was Charlie, a gap-toothed 7-year-old, beaming with pride in a ridiculous, handmade robot costume I had constructed from cardboard boxes and aluminum foil. I had stayed up for 3 nights straight, my fingers aching, to get it just right for his school play. He had told everyone, my mom made it. She's the best. There he was again at 12, holding up a crookedly knitted sweater, its colors a bit too bright, its sleeves a bit too long. It was the first thing I had ever knitted, and he had worn it until it was threadbare, refusing to let me throw it away. Photo after photo, a lifetime of memories. A boy who was not ashamed. A boy who was loved fiercely and who, I had believed, loved me back in the same way. I looked at the face of that happy, unburdened child and then thought of the man on the phone, his voice dripping with condescension. The shame wasn't mine. I had nothing to be ashamed of. I had worked hard, loved deeply, and raised a son. The shame was his. He was ashamed of the cardboard costumes, the knitted sweaters, the Tupperware of potato salad. He was ashamed of the very foundations upon which his privileged life had been built. And as I sat there, the cold anger in my chest began to take shape, transforming from a raw emotion into a precise, crystalline idea. He wanted to erase his past? Fine. I would give it back to him. I would wrap it in a beautiful bow and present it to him in front of everyone he was so desperate to impress. It would not be a cruel revenge. It would be an elegant education, a lesson in gratitude. The first step was the easiest and the most deliciously ironic. I went to the bank the next day and withdrew a significant portion of my savings. This was the nest egg franc, and I had started the fund I had painstakingly added to over the years. It was the in case of emergency money. In my mind, it had always been for Charlie. For a medical bill, a lost job, a crisis. I had never imagined the emergency would be my own dignity. The irony was that I was going to use the money I had saved for his future to force him to confront his past. The thought brought the first genuine, albeit bitter, smile to my face in days. My next call was to my brother. When he answered, there was no cheer in his voice, only a quiet, worried concern. "Molly, are you all right?" I surprised him. There was no grief in my voice, no self-pity. There was only steel. "Terry, I need your help," I said, my tone calm and resolute. "I'm going to throw Charlie a surprise birthday party. His birthday, conveniently, fell just a few days after Christmas. It was the perfect cover." "A party?" he asked, his confusion evident. "After what he did?" "Especially after what he did," I replied. "It's going to be a very special party. A family reunion of sorts. I need you to help me get everyone there. Our cousins, the nieces and nephews. Everyone." I explained the broad strokes of my plan, leaving out the most dramatic details. I didn't want to spoil the surprise for him, either. I could hear the slow smile spreading in his voice as he understood. "Molly, you're a genius," he said, a note of admiration in his voice that warmed me more than any sympathy could have. "Count me in. We'll get the whole clan there. They'll be thrilled. My family, the one Charlie seemed to consider a liability, would be my army." The most delicate part of the plan was the call to Tina. I rehearsed it in my head a dozen times, calibrating the exact tone of warm, slightly doting mother-in-law. I needed her not just to attend, but to be my unwitting accomplice. I called her that afternoon. "Tina, my dear, how are you?" I began, my voice dripping with a sweetness that felt like poison on my own tongue. "I was just thinking, with Charlie's birthday coming up right after the holidays, it's a shame we never do anything truly special for him. You two are always so busy." She was wary at first, her responses clipped and polite. I could picture her, phone pressed to her ear, one perfectly manicured eyebrow arched in suspicion. I pressed on, laying the trap carefully. "I've had a little idea," I said, infusing my voice with breathless excitement. "I want to throw him a surprise party. A proper one. Something really elegant and beautiful to show him how much we all appreciate him. And Tina," I added, delivering the masterstroke, "it would mean the world to me and to him if your family could be there. I know how much he adores them. It would be the perfect way to bring both our families together." There was a pause. I could hear the calculations clicking away in her mind. A party. An elegant party. A chance to show off her husband, her life, to a wider audience. An event she could take credit for in the retelling. The vanity, I was counting on won out over her suspicion. "Why, Molly," she purred, her voice thawing instantly. "That is a truly wonderful idea. Of course, we'd love to help. My parents will be in town anyway, as you know. I'm sure they would be delighted to attend. Where were you thinking of having it?" "Oh, don't you worry your pretty head about a thing. I said, the phrase making me want to gag. It's my treat, my gift to my son. I have a few ideas for a venue. Just make sure everyone is free on the 28th, and please, not a word to Charlie. It has to be a complete surprise, she promised, her voice now bubbling with the enthusiasm of a co-conspirator. She thought we were on the same team, planning a tribute to her wonderful husband. She had no idea she was helping me set the stage for his reckoning. The next few days were a blur of focused activity. I channeled every ounce of my pain and anger into meticulous planning. I rented a small, chic art gallery for the evening, a place with high ceilings, white walls, and dramatic lighting. It was the kind of place Tina would approve of, sophisticated and modern, a world away from a church basement or a community hall. I hired a caterer who specialized in delicate hors d'oeuvres and elegant canapés, nothing that could be served from Tupperware. I even hired a string quartet to play classical music in the corner. The entire scene would be designed to lull Charlie and Tina into a state of smug security. They would walk in and see a reflection of their own aspirations, a party that confirmed their status. While the public-facing preparations were all about elegance and class, my private preparations were a journey back in time. I spent hours hunched over the old photo albums, my heart aching with a bittersweet nostalgia. I carefully selected the images, not for their photographic quality, but for the power of the stories they contained. I chose the picture of Frank, young and handsome in his greasy overalls, holding a tiny, bundled Charlie in his arms, the love in his eyes so palpable it transcended the faded photograph. I chose the one of me, looking utterly exhausted but with a fierce, protective smile, reading a bedtime story to him in our cramped living room, the wallpaper peeling behind us. I chose the photo of him on his first day of school, his uniform slightly too big, his face a mixture of terror and excitement as he clutched my hand. Each photo was a testament to a life built on love, not luxury. A life of making do, of finding joy in small things, of a bond one once believed was unbreakable. I took the chosen photographs to a professional shop and had them scanned and digitized, creating a slideshow. I wrote a script to accompany it, not a speech of anger or recrimination, but a narrative. The story of a boy and his mother. The story of where he came from. Christmas Day came and went. It was the first one I had ever spent truly alone. Terrence invited me to his house, but I declined. I needed the solitude. I needed to let the quiet of my house fuel the resolve that was now burning so brightly within me. I imagined the scene at Charlie's home, the clinking of expensive glasses, the murmur of polite conversation, the rich food, the effortless laughter. I imagined my son, my Charlie, moving among them, confident and charming, the successful man I had given everything to create. And I felt a profound sadness for him, a pity for the man who had gained so much but had lost the one thing that mattered, himself. The thought did not weaken my resolve. It strengthened it. He needed this. He needed to be reminded of who he was, not for my sake, but for his own. The day of the party, Charlie called. Tina, true to her word, had kept the secret, but had told him they were going to a gallery opening for a friend of her father's. His voice was laced with a familiar, anxious energy. "Mom, are you coming tonight? Tina mentioned you'd be there. He was vetting me, trying to gauge my level of potential embarrassment." "Of course, dear," I said, my voice as smooth as silk. "I wouldn't miss it, great, he said a little too quickly. "So, what are you planning on wearing?" The question hung in the air between us, heavy with unspoken meaning. He was asking if I would look the part, if I would blend in. "Don't you worry, Charlie," I said, a faint, ironic smile on my lips. "I think I'll manage not to embarrass you." I had bought a new dress for the occasion. It was simple, elegant, a deep navy blue silk that I had purchased from a consignment shop in a wealthy part of town. It had cost a fraction of what Tina's gowns likely did, but it fit me perfectly. It was a dress of quiet dignity. It was my armor. That evening, I arrived at the gallery early. Everything was perfect. The lighting was soft. The music was beautiful. The scent of lilies hung in the air. My family began to arrive, my brother giving me a solid, reassuring hug. My nieces and nephews, all grown now with families of their own, greeted me with warmth, their presence a comforting balm. They were good people, grounded and unpretentious. They were my people. Then, Tina's family started to arrive. They were exactly as I had pictured them. Tall, impeccably dressed, exuding an aura of casual wealth. Tina's parents, Robert and Eleanor, were particularly formidable. He was a stern-looking man in a tailored suit, and she was a vision of icy blonde elegance. I watched them from a distance, my heart beating a little faster. These were the people for whom my son had disowned me. Finally, Charlie and Tina made their grand entrance. A coordinated shout of surprise went up. Charlie's face was a masterpiece of conflicting emotions. First, stunned shock, then a slow, spreading grin of pure ego as he realized this entire, lavish event was in his honor. He scanned the room, his eyes widening as he saw the string quartet, the caterers, the sheer expense of it all. He looked at Tina, who simply shrugged with a theatrical innocence. Then his eyes found me. He walked over, his face flushed with pleasure. "Mom," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You did all this?" "I don't know what to say. Happy birthday, sweetheart," I said, kissing his cheek. The skin felt cool, alien. "You deserve it," he hugged me, a tight, performative embrace for the benefit of the watching crowd. "Thank you," he whispered, but his eyes were already darting around the room, soaking in the admiration, basking in the glow of being the center of attention. He was in his element. Tina glided to his side, her hand possessively on his arm, her smile radiant. She looked at me with a new, appraising respect. In her world, money and grand gestures were the currency of love, and I had just proven I could speak the language. They were both completely, blissfully unaware of what was to come. I let them mingle for an hour. Let Charlie accept the backslaps and congratulations. Let Tina hold court with her relatives, subtly taking credit for the party's impeccable taste. I watched my son. I saw the way he laughed a little too loudly at Robert's jokes, the way he deferred to Eleanor's opinions, the way he effortlessly mirrored their gestures and speech patterns. He was a chameleon, a brilliant actor playing the role of a lifetime. The boy who loved potato salad was nowhere to be seen. Then, I made my way to the small lectern we had set up near a large, blank white wall. The room quieted. I tapped the microphone gently. "Good evening, everyone. For those of you I haven't had the pleasure of meeting, my name is Molly, and I am the very, very proud mother of the birthday boy, Charlie," a smattering of warm applause. Charlie beamed at me, a perfect, handsome son, his face glowing with affection. I smiled back, a calm, maternal smile that hid the storm raging inside me. "I wanted to do something special for Charlie's birthday this year," I continued, my voice steady and clear. "Something more than just a gift. I wanted to give him a story." His story at that moment, as arranged, the lights in the gallery dimmed, and a projector whirred to life, casting the first image onto the wall. It was the photo of Frank in his overalls, holding baby Charlie. A collective awe went through the room. I saw Charlie's smile falter for just a fraction of a second. "This is Charlie's father, Frank," I said, my voice softening. He was a mechanic, the best in the county. He could listen to an engine and know exactly what was wrong with it like a doctor listening to a heartbeat. He didn't have much money, but he had hands that could build and fix anything, and a heart big enough to hold the whole world. He would have been so proud of the man Charlie has become. The next slide appeared. It was me, looking young and tired, reading to a small Charlie in our shabby apartment. After Frank passed away, I said, my voice catching just enough to be convincing, it was just the two of us. We didn't have much. I remember this apartment. The heating was terrible and the wallpaper was peeling. But we had stories. I would read to him every single night, and we would travel to magical lands, all from the comfort of that lumpy old sofa. I saw Charlie's jaw tighten. Tina shot him a questioning look. Her parents were watching the screen, their expressions unreadable. The next photo came up, Charlie in the handmade robot costume. Charlie was always so creative, I said with a warm laugh. For his second grade play, He wanted to be a robot. We couldn't afford to buy a costume, so we made one. We spent a whole weekend with cardboard boxes, tinfoil, and glue. He was so proud of it. He told everyone his mom could make anything slide after slide. Charlie with his first rusty bicycle, a prize assembled from parts salvaged from the town dump. Charlie holding up a certificate for perfect attendance, his prize a $5 gift certificate to the local diner, which he spent on milkshakes for us to share. Charlie in the ill-fitting, brightly colored sweater I had knitted for him. With each image, I told a simple, honest story. A story of struggle, of resilience, of making love the most valuable commodity we owned. I wasn't shaming him with poverty. I was honoring him with a history of love. The room was completely silent now, save for the sound of my voice. I could feel the atmosphere shifting. The polite, superficial party chatter had evaporated, replaced by a focused, intense emotional energy. I chanced to look at Charlie. The color had drained from his face. His confident smile was gone, replaced by a mask of horrified disbelief. He was staring at the screen as if it were showing a ghost. Tina looked aghast, her hand hovering near her mouth. She kept glancing from the screen to her parents, her expression a frantic plea for them to dismiss this, to see it as the ramblings of a sentimental old woman. But they weren't looking at her. Robert's stern facade had cracked. He was watching the slideshow with a look of intense concentration. And Eleanor, the woman I had built up in my mind as an ice queen, had tears welling in her eyes. Real tears. As the photo of a teenage Charlie helping me in my small vegetable garden appeared on the screen, Eleanor reached out and put a hand on my arm. "Molly," she whispered, her voice husky. This is extraordinary. I had reached the final photograph. It was a more recent one from about 10 years ago before he had met Tina. It was the two of us standing outside my house. I was handing him a Tupperware container, and he was smiling, a real, unforced smile. This was the day he left for his final year of university, I said. I had packed him his favorite potato salad for the drive. Silly, I know. But sometimes, love looks a lot like potato salad in a plastic container. The slideshow ended. The screen went blank. The lights came up slowly. I turned from the lectern and looked directly at my son. His face was pale, his eyes wide with a mixture of shame, anger, and a dawning, terrible understanding. He knew now that I knew. "Charlie," I said, my voice no longer amplified by the microphone, but carrying across the silent room with perfect clarity. "I wanted to give you a gift for your birthday. The gift of your own story. Because a man who is ashamed of where he comes from has nothing to build his future on. The cardboard boxes, the patched trousers, the peeling wallpaper. That is not your shame. That is your strength. That is the foundation you are standing on tonight. The only thing in this world to ever be truly ashamed of, my son, is ingratitude." I paused, letting the words settle in the heavy air. "Happy birthday." For a long moment, nobody moved. Charlie and I were locked in a silent battle of wills across the polished gallery floor. His humiliation was a palpable thing, a shimmering heat in the air around him. But then, the spell was broken by an unexpected source. Eleanor, Tina's mother, walked right up to me. She took both of my hands in hers, her grip surprisingly firm. "Molly," she said, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "That was the most beautiful, honest tribute I have ever witnessed. You are an incredible woman, and you raised an incredible son." She then turned and looked pointedly at Charlie. "A son who, I hope, understands the gift he has just been given." Robert followed, clapping a hand on my shoulder. "Well said, Eleanor," he grunted, with a nod of profound respect. "Takes guts to tell the truth like that." "Takes character." Suddenly, the room erupted. Not with the polite applause from before, but with a genuine, heartfelt ovation. It was led by Tina's family, her cousins, her aunts, and joined enthusiastically by my own. They weren't seeing a humble woman from the wrong side of the tracks. They were seeing a matriarch, a woman of substance and strength. The very authenticity Charlie had feared would embarrass him was the thing they admired most. Charlie and Tina stood frozen, isolated in the center of the room as the warmth and admiration flowed around them, directed entirely at me. Tina looked utterly bewildered, her carefully constructed social universe turned upside down. Charlie just looked broken. He tried to approach me, his mouth opening and closing, but no words came out. I simply looked at him, not with anger, not with triumph, but with a deep and abiding sorrow for the boy he had lost. Then, I turned my back on him. My brother Terrence was at my side instantly, his arm around my shoulders. "Let's go home, Molly," he said softly. And surrounded by my family, I walked out of the gallery, leaving my son to stand alone in the wreckage of his own creation. In the weeks that followed, my life changed in ways I never could have anticipated. Charlie called, texted, even showed up on my doorstep once, his apology stammering and hollow. He was sorry he had been caught, not sorry for what he had done. I listened politely, and then closed the door. I was not his judge, but I was no longer his safety net either. The emotional ties had been severed, not in anger, but in a calm acceptance of the truth. Our relationship, if it were to ever exist again, would have to be rebuilt from a new foundation, one of honesty, and I was not sure he was capable of that. The most surprising development was my friendship with Eleanor. She called me a few days after the party and invited me to lunch. We talked for 3 hours. She told me about her own, surprisingly modest upbringing and the pressures of the world she had married into. She confessed that she had always found Tina's social climbing tiresome and had worried that Charlie was more in love with their lifestyle than with their daughter. "You reminded me of what's real, Molly," she told me, squeezing my hand across the table. We became genuine friends, two women from different worlds who found common ground in our shared values. Through her, I found a new community, people who were interested in my stories, who valued my perspective, and who never once made me feel like I didn't fit. I used the rest of that rainy day money to take a trip to Italy, something I had dreamed of my whole life. I took an art history class. I started painting again. My life, which had been so small and so focused on my son, bloomed into something expansive and beautiful and, for the first time in a very long time, entirely my own. I had reclaimed myself. I had learned that true wealth is not about what you have, but about who you are. By trying to erase his past, Charlie had made himself poor in spirit. I, by embracing mine, had never been richer. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? It's a question I've asked myself, and I believe I found the right answer for me. Sometimes, the most powerful lessons are not taught with anger, but with love, even a tough, painful love that forces someone to see the truth. Let me know in the comments what you think about my decision. I'd be very interested to hear your opinions, and please, write me where you heard this story from. It warms my heart to know how far these stories can travel. If this story touched your heart, please consider liking the video and subscribing to my channel. Every subscription helps me share more stories of life, love, and the lessons we learn along the way. There are many other stories waiting for you. For those who are able and wish to support our work further, we have the Super Thanks feature enabled. Your generosity allows us to continue bringing these narratives to light. With heartfelt greetings. Until next time.